Greetings and welcome to my new video regarding the Crëvwa, a fictional race of people made by a good Norwegian friend of mine, Norwegian set of a contest, so you can already tell his religious beliefs. As always, before watching the video, remember to please like and subscribe, but most of all, comment and share. Like, I don't care if you like the video or subscribe to the video, comment on the video, make a discussion, and share the video to others. But my channel does have one rule. It's my right to make the rule as a channel. Um, no blasphemy against God. You may be free to blaspheme religious texts all that you like, but if you associate them with God, do not insult them. Now, on with the show, and let us get started. The Crëvwa are mountain dwellers from the North Ural Mountains. However, they do not have any major relation to the Uralic peoples. In fact, in their early rule, they were in conflict with them, among others. A bit of a backstory: the name Crëvwa comes from the Norwegian word grav, for grave, similar to the Yamnaya, who are one of the earliest Indo-European tribes, coming from the Russian word for grave. The words used in the Crëvwa language are usually words from languages like Greek, Norwegian, Russian, Turkish, Finnish, Hungarian, among others. Now, I will say this: Norwegian set of a contest, you could have chosen a slightly better language and country like, I don't know, Swedish. Uh, though, of course, these words were bended according to the rules and pronunciation of the Crëvwa people. With that out of the way, let's talk about their history. It starts around 3,800 to 4,000 BC, where the earliest signs of civilization were found. The Crëvwa, like many other tribes at the time, were more nomadic and warlike, migrating up and down the northern Urals, raiding and trading with the peoples they came across. They were in conflict with the Uralic people many times, often sending raiding expeditions into Uralic towns, villages, and farms, usually targeting animals, crops, and other sources of food, making sure to starve and cripple the tribes they came across. However, with changing conditions, a need to explore and conquer, struggle against uniting Uralic tribes and peoples, among many other factors, around the 1200s BC, the Crëvwa had to migrate. They gathered their first horses, packed their essentials, and moved out in droves, migrating east to where modern-day Irkutsk is, where they came in contact with the early Turks, Mongols, and Chinese. They, as usual, traded, raided, and fought as mercenaries for and against the people they met with when they settled. Notably, Crëvwa mercenaries fought in various wars, such as the Battle of the Zhao Succession, the Battle of Xiao, the Battle of Yanling, and the Battle of Fujiao. However, with the coming of the Chu-Han contention and incursions from Turks, Mongols, and other peoples in the area, the Crëvwa were fed up and migrated again, seeking refuge in foreign lands. The Crëvwa this time were sent to northern India and Afghanistan, finishing their migration around there in 200 BC. In this period, the Crëvwa learned cavalry warfare from the Indo-Iranians in the region, such as chariot warfare, horse archery, and even hammer and anvil tactics, when learning about the battles of Alexander the Great against the Persian Empire. During this time, they thrived in the mountains of Afghanistan, the mountains being similar to the homeland they held at the back of their mind ever since they left. However, the Crëvwa, being an ever curious and eccentric people, migrated again, this time to where modern-day Kazakhstan is. They settled on the northern shores of the Caspian Sea, interacting with peoples such as the Avars, Khazars, um, and Moses, from which they started learning about the stories of Abraham, Avraham, and Crëvwa, Moses, Mucha, and Crëvwa, among other prophets from the Old Testament. They also learned more complex cavalry tactics, but didn't do anything notable except serve as mercenaries in wars and trade with the Avars and Khazars. However, with the arrival of the Cumans in the 1000s, the Crăvwa had to flee, going west to the Baltic Sea, mostly settling in rural and forest areas of Poland, Lithuania, Kaliningrad, and Latvia, where they learned more about the Abrahamic faith, and some of the Crăvwa even converted to Catholicism and settled full time in Poland, which is why most modern Poles have a small percentage of Crăvwa DNA. The Crăvwa remained in the Baltic area for 800 years, fighting as mercenaries, trading, and learning a lot of science, literature, and philosophy from the Catholics who lived there. However, with the wars and worse conditions in Poland in the 1800s, the Crăvwa fled once more, this time going to Siberia, settling there and going back to their hunter gatherer ways. In this small period, lasting from 1827 to 1951, the Crăvwa hunted and gathered as usual, but also fought as mercenaries in the Crimean War, World War I, the Russian Civil War, and World War II. But their involvement didn't do much for the Russian side, let's just say that, especially in the latter wars. In 1951, this period of Siberian settling came to an end with the tyranny of leaders like Joseph Stalin and his successors. The Crăvwa fled once again to the east, this time arriving in Alaska and settling in Canada in 1958, gaining a reservation in Yukon, paying for it with the money they got fighting for the Russians as mercenaries, among various other incomes. The Crăvwa settled in Yukon and established temples for their religion, which I'll go into detail later, and small communities, mostly hunting villages, forts, and soldiers, and religious communities for Crăvwa priests. The Crăvwa, as usual, fought as mercenaries, fighting on the UN side in the Congo Crisis, insurgency in Quebec, Oka Crisis, Persian Gulf War, and the Somali Civil War. However, the Crăvwa's use as mercenaries was short-lived, entering the 1990s because of accusations of war crimes, mostly mistreatment of captured soldiers and civilians, most notably the brutal execution of an Iraqi soldier named Muhammad al-Yazal, which was recorded during the war but posted on the internet in the mid 2010s on websites such as LiveLeak. The video was a very brutal and bloody video in which the Crăvwa soldier, Captain Khawanghoror Aulimyach, and his men had the Iraqi soldiers strapped down to a dirty tile floor. The men laughed and joked in Crăvwa, insulted the man, insulted the Islamic faith, and insulted Saddam Hussein, calling him things such as a goat defiler and a man surrounded by yes men. The video goes on with uh well further war crime shit that I will not say, okay? Yeah. Yeah. Further war crime shit which I will not say. Eventually, once the soldier okay, this okay. Once again, I am reading the script. Further war crimes. Actually, pretty horrendous. Pretty horrendous shit. Actually, pretty horrendous. Well, let's just say this. Videos used by the Hog Court, they were used to convince the Canadian Armed Forces to stop employing Crăvwas and punish the war criminals. The government kindly conceded and did as the international community asked, banning the use of Crăvwa mercenaries in wars. From then on, the Crăvwas became more modern, adopting more modern culture and technology, but remained very conservative with the... Okay, then. In the mid 1990s, a huge influx of Crăvwas came into the U.S., most of them migrating legally and settling down, marrying American women. And now, roughly 30% of second generation immigrants in the USA are of Crăvwa origin. In recent times, the Crëvwa people have gone under more persecution as a result of their staunch ultra conservative uh, ideology and religion, especially under the Trudeau administration. Crëvwa were kicked out of universities and jobs because of their culture's views against the left in general, and specifically feminism and the LGBT movement, causing more to migrate into the US, some back into Russia, with some families eventually going all the way back to the Ural Mountains to live in their ancient homeland. Now, that was a summary of the Crëvwa culture, well, of the history of the Crëvwa. Now, let us get on to their faith and culture. The faith of the Crëvwa people doesn't have an official name, but it is usually called Reitsomism. It is a monotheistic pagan faith which worships a deity that is called Yivhava, Chaunsa Chawaim, but we will simply call him Yivhava. Yivhava is depicted as a wolf with burning fur laying next to the earth and is described as being benevolent, brave, and honest, among other traits that display chivalry and honor. Yivhava appears to the Raotzim, who are the prophets of Rezomism, to give revelations. Usually, the revelations are given to end a current habit of the Crëvwa which displeases Yivhava, or to warn them of a coming affliction. The doctrine of Reitsomism is quite vague and can differ from community to community, as there are no written scriptures in Reitsomism, the faith being passed down from parent to child and told by the Faurotzim, who are priests in Reitsomism. However vague the doctrines are, there are three things that all Reitsomists believe in common: the Reitsomist creation story, the four commandments: do not flee from battle, do not lie to the injury of your neighbor, do not steal or swindle, and be loyal to all oaths sworn, whether by your own honor, or by Yivhawa's honor, or by the honor of your family, nation, or pretty much anything else in earth or in Faures Relsor, uh, aka heaven, and the afterlife, which for Oilefim, that is, those who go to Faurelsor, are given a large palace out of wood and shields, a number of servants, and a never ending warmth and happiness likened to that experienced among campfires with friends and family. On the contrary, the Gerechim, reprobates, or people who will go to hell, are sent to a place called Baunom, which is characterized by extreme cold, worse than any winter, in which the Crëvwa migrate away from during cold seasons, during their seasonal migration, as well as starvation, and the sensation of being dragged across a rough and sharp surface of rocks, wood, and ice. They undergo this for all eternity. On the creation myth, Reitsomists believe that in the beginning the stars were created from the spark of an iron bone that Yivhawa gnawed on, which then set the darkness ablaze. Yivhawa then pounced on the fire, covering it with his body, which is why his fur burns perpetually. Yivhawa, upon defeating the fire, controlled it and put it to his use, lighting up the darkness with stars. Meanwhile, when the fire roared, the bone which Yivhawa gnawed on melted and became a large liquid, some parts of which solidified after the fire was extinguished, making the earth. Yivhawa then, intrigued by this, looked at the newly formed mass, observing it closely, drooling over it, and the spirit of Yivhawa, fertile and sacred, caused a plant to spring forth. Then the plant, overflowing with power, shot out more seeds like a volcano, and trees and plants grew far and wide, as well as life which grew from the seeds of the plant. Yivhawa then laid down next to the earth his burning fur, waning it in the summer season, and observed it, and saw life grow more and more prosperous. Eventually, Yivhawa decided that he should communicate with the new people and sent a Ravurom, which is the Reitsomist equivalent of an angel, to a Crëvwa. The man was a Crëvwa called Soiltan, who is called Soiltan Raus Chaunsa Yistsunum, which means Soiltan, prophet of grace, because of his mercy and forgiveness on his enemies, as well as the doctrine that he taught, which emphasized the forgiveness of debts and the letting go of those taken in war. Sultan lived a life like any other prophet of any other religion, preaching the central doctrines of Reitsomism, living them almost perfectly, and converting many people. Among others, there are Rautsim, such as Aulim Rauts, Oilefyach Rauts, Veinoilev Rauts, etc., who lived similar lives and taught similar teachings as the Soiltan Raus. Further, with the secular aspect of Crëvwa culture, Crëvwa people usually eat moose, or as they call it, el chanom. They typically eat it with a mix of the cambium layer and tree bark, blood pudding, which is a jelly-like substance made from the blood of an animal, but typically a moose or bear, and some or another vegetable or fruit collected in the summer season. They also typically eat foods and delicacies from the Chinese, Mongolians, Iranians, Polish, and Russians due to their long time spent dwelling with said cultures. Other than that, the Crëvwa don't have much difference from other cultures. They have blended a lot of traditions into their own, and aside from their religion, language, and genetics, they're pretty much just a mix between all the lands they migrated in. Now I will address some of the groups that split off from the main body of Crëvwites. The first one are those who have settled in the Manchukuo region in China, who are now called Chonchochim by Crëvwites, which is Chinese in Crëvwa. They are a very small remnant with about 250 people in their population and remained in the Mongolia China region way after the Crëvwa migrated away. They speak Chinese with a bit of the inflections and grammar from Crëvwa, but overall basically became Chinese, having roughly 80 to 90% genetic similarity with the Chinese and Mongolian people. The second is Hind Thachim, coming from the word Hindu, referring to those who live in Afghanistan and northern India. They're also quite small, having a population of only 2,000 people. They speak Crëvwa, but their dialect is so influenced by local Indian languages and Farsi that they are not mutually intelligible with the main body of Crëvwites. Essentially, they speak a different language. Their faith is a mix between the Crëvwa religion, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, and Islam, mostly Hanafi Islam, uh, of the Sunni branch. Though, of course, Muslims will get me in trouble by saying it is a sect. The third is the Soirachim, which are a group that split off from the Crëvwas around 350 AD. Instead of going to modern-day Kazakhstan, they went west towards Iran, settling there for a while, and then, following the Turkish migration, migrated into modern-day Syria. They live in and around Deir ez-Zor, and remained mostly Crëvwa. That is to say, they speak a dialect of Crëvwa that is mutually intelligible with modern-day Crëvwa, and are culturally united with the Crëvwa people in North Canada today. They're mostly Sunni Muslims, even having written a Crëvwa copy of the Quran sometime in the 1900s. And there is a Crëvwa translation of the Shahada that goes, Fi tsah dach fendine aune yivhawa otyi Allah. Oit fi tsah dach Muhammad aune el Retzor chauna Allah. The fourth are the Khazrachim, which are those who remain in what is the modern-day Kazakhstan, Russia, Ukraine region. They mostly speak a Crëvwa Creole of Kazakh, but their faith is the same as the Crëvwa folk religion, and they still identify more with the Crëvwa community than the Kazakh community. The fifth and last is the Pochalim, which remained in Poland after the 1800s, but later in the 1900s migrated to Denmark. They remain there today. This concludes the story and explanation of the Crëvwa people, and as always, El Retsor Aune Yivhalisk Vaul Slachor Haunsa Tsemlamo Rahi Menka Auna Olgaumiskaune Olgeumor Helitwirhius Faurelsvois Oitoilefisk Al Boirpatisk Al Yinnachist Ol Helgisk Oit Ol Pachisk Amin.